So with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Umang Patel, who is currently working at Microsoft and is also a pediatrician in the NHS. And he is here to talk about something which has suddenly changed because he's been on holiday. So it's almost useless for me to actually describe what he is going to talk about officially, but hopefully his holiday will produce a wonderful talk for us to hear about transformation in digital and healthcare. So with that, please, a great warm welcome for Dr. Umang Patel.
Thank you, Jack. I'm really nervous. I haven't done this for a long time. And do you know when you change your talk last minute and you wish you'd practiced earlier? That's definitely where I am. So please do bear with me. If you read the bio, I was going to talk about data, and I will, of course, cover that. But I was in Greece. It was lovely. Thank you very much. This is a photo I took. And whilst I was on holiday, it suddenly occurred to me, thinking about doing this talk, that maybe in healthcare I needed to start with some of the optimism, but before we could do that, we needed to cover some of the downsides that are going on, right? And it reminded me of the Charles Dickens quote. And because I took one good photo, I wanted to put it into a background because we've all spent 2 years looking at screensavers, so this is mine. So it really did occur to me that in healthcare, it's both the best of times and the worst of times. And I thought if it was okay by you, I'd spend a few minutes talking about that, in the hope that it would stimulate some conversation that we can pick up later here or downstairs or at one of the other events. Now I was going to ask you if you wanted me to start with the good news or the bad news, but I've only practiced it with the bad news first, so we're going to go that way. Reasons why I didn't necessarily want to come home. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to spend a few minutes, maybe the next 5 or so, just talking about some of the challenges that we face in healthcare today. I know you know a lot of these already, and I'm really excited that lots of people here are coming up with solutions for them. But the first one top of my mind was the fact that waiting lists are just monumental. We're 6 million now-ish in the NHS. That's 1 in 9 people. I hope a lot of you in this room aren't on a waiting list, but I can almost guarantee that at least everybody in this room will have somebody that's on a waiting list. For me, that's my dad. He's waiting for his cataract operation, and although that's not painful, thankfully, it does impact his life. It means that he can't drive at night, which means he spends less time with his grandchildren, and that upsets him. Waiting lists are long. There's no quick fix. We've got to start thinking about how we can start tackling them. And hopefully there'll be some great ideas that come out from today and other events, so we can start sweating the assets and getting there. We just don't have enough staff. So last time I checked, there were 93,000 vacancies for the NHS on the NHS jobs website. That's a hell of a lot. And unfortunately, there's no magic staffing tree. There's no country that we can steal loads of doctors or nurses from. So we're going to have to work out other ways of trying to become more efficient over time and deal with the challenges. I've got light. Am I right over this side? So we just don't have enough staff, and I really don't know what the answer is. And again, if anyone's got a solution to that, please do let me know. The third thing that I wanted to talk about as one of the big problems, of course, everybody in here knows what about, is just the burden of chronic disease. Actually, just by show of hands, how many people here are involved with a company that's doing something in relation to chronic disease? I know a few people are. How many people are doing that in something other than diabetes? Good, that's really pleasing, because we always talk about diabetes, and of course a huge problem. It's £1 million an hour at least in the NHS, and continues to grow. I'm not too worried about diabetes, if I'm honest. I somehow believe that somebody clever will come up with a clever way of creating an artificial pancreas, or there'll be some way of solving diabetes. If you've got that solution, then again, please come and let me know. You can build it on Azure Stack. That's my Microsoft thing ticked. But like I say, diabetes doesn't keep me awake at night, but mental health does. So, as Jack said, my proper job is a paediatrician, and half of my ward is full of mental health patients. It's a general paediatric ward. We should be dealing with constipation and respiratory illnesses and packing people up and sending them home. But we're having patients stay with us for over 100 days at a time because it's just the safest place for them to be. It's a huge challenge. Before the pandemic, we spent £12.2 billion as an NHS on mental health problems. I have no idea what it is now, given the impact that the pandemic has had. So we've got to start thinking about how we can tackle those. So those were my beginning problems. I hope not too depressing for a Monday morning, although in fairness, if some of you here got early enough, you started Rishi Sunak, so this may well have been enlightening. But maybe we should move on to something more cheerful. Of course, one of the challenges is that there just isn't a quick solution. It doesn't matter how many great policies we come up with, and I'm sure Sajid Javid later will set out a clear plan, which we'll be thankful for, but there's a load of stuff that we've got to do in order to just try and do what we can today to solve some of these challenges. Because it's a bit of a segue, and if you'll excuse the cheese, and I can see Brian's here already, so he'll know these are my two children, but this is my break into talking about something more cheerful. So the first reason I'm excited about the future is because there's just more data than ever before. So since I started medical school, there's been a billion-fold increase in the amount of data that we collect and put into medical trials. That's huge. Makes you feel very old, but it is a huge fact. There's a billion points of more data that goes into clinical trials. And we may say, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because with that data, we can come up with some exciting and insightful things. There was a time that I'd be stood here smoking a Camel, telling you, and we'd all be smoking, and in 1948, we learned that that was a bad idea. We learned all of that from a single study in the US, in Framingham, where a doctor and some friends took around 5,000 people and just measured what they could. They did blood pressure, they did heart rate, they found out what killed their family members, they did some simple blood tests. They collected all of that information up, and we learned from it in 1948 that smoking was bad. We learned from it that in 1948 that blood pressure was going to be the thing that most likely contributed to the factors that were going to kill you. We learned all of that from something that was done all of those years ago. Imagine if that doctor had smartwatches. Imagine if every one of those 5,000 patients we had was able to have a genome sequence as well. Well, that's what we're doing today. I can't wait for us to be able to use that data to create more insights. I have no idea what the solution is to the mental health crisis that I talked about earlier, but I'm very hopeful that throughout some of this data, we'll be able to find it and start making real impact. Of course, if you're going to collect up a load of data, you need to somehow process it. So maybe when there are 5,000 people, you're able to put it into a ledger, you're able to manipulate it manually. Today, as we collect up all of this information, of course, we need new ways of dealing with that data. That's why the cloud for us is really exciting. That ability to put all of it somewhere, combine it, and process it in a different way. So the compute capabilities of moving stuff to the cloud, which is why that's all we ever seem to be talking about when you talk to a big tech company nowadays, is because we just see that's where we need to be in order to generate these insights. So I'm excited about that. And of course, it all exists today. The second reason that I'm optimistic is because of the resilience of the workforce. So I used to do this talk. I go up and down the country now in this role, talking to lots of doctors, lots of CEOs, lots of hospitals. And when we used to do this talk pre-pandemic, I used to end on some of these slides that would say, this is your call to action. Come on, don't be lulled into inaction. You always think it's going to be harder today, and we overestimate what we can do. Well, actually, now what I see is that that's entirely turned upside down. It's on its head. I actually think that what we've experienced and lived through for the last 10 years means that we're better set up, the last 2 years means that we're better set up than ever before for the next 10. And I find that really inspiring. People are just dealing with it, as everyone has had to in their personal lives, in their professional lives. We've just changed. We know that whatever it throws at us, healthcare is not like making biscuits. We can't give up. We've got to move on. And that's what everyone is doing. We've also proven throughout the pandemic that we can start using consumer-grade technology. And in fact, we should be using consumer-grade technology. Of course, I'll talk about Microsoft Teams because that was our greatest success story during that time. What we did was we took Microsoft Teams, rolled it out across the NHS, and we were able to save 2.9 million hours over a 6-month trial period done with Imperial. That was amazing. Actually, if you roll that up, that's the equivalent of around 3,000 full-time equivalent staff for the NHS. So when we talked about the challenges of staffing, I'd love the idea of us being able to sweat the assets that we've got to drive greater efficiencies that will lead us to being able to generate more time for patient care, which is why everybody that works in healthcare is there in the first place, right? So we've got to start working out how we can take consumer-grade technology and scaling it. And like I say, we've proven that it doesn't really leave that many people behind, at least nowhere near as many as we feared when we first started talking about this. I wonder what's next, right? So if you would have said before the pandemic, imagine that you'd be doing all of your remote teaching, all of your stuff on Teams or through a computer, would have said, yeah, maybe in 5 years or 10 years. Well, actually, when I talk to medical students today, in fact, I was teaching someone Friday, they weren't interested in what Teams was going to be doing next. They expect their futures to look a little bit like this, right? They don't expect to be writing notes. They expect to be dictating through clinical ambient systems like Nuance have got. That's really exciting. What really gives me inspiration is the fact that that's how they're thinking. So they're stood there thinking, well, actually, this is what I'm expecting to be interacting with my patients like. And this is not something that they're dreaming of for the end of their careers. This is what they're expecting to be doing pretty soon. In fact, if you fancy a go, come up to floor 5. You can try HoloLens, and whilst you're there, we'll even teach you a bit of cardiac anatomy to boot. So please come and see us. Cool. I can't talk more about HoloLens. Is there another? Got it. The third reason that I'm excited, or the fourth one, is that integrated care is actually here to stay. It's a complete truism, right? So we always talk about prevention being better than cure. We always know that integrated care is better than non-integrated care. It's a bit of a silly thing to say, but we've never actually been able to do it properly before. Now we can, and we've proven that again by use of some of the technology that we've seen throughout the pandemic. The fact that we can integrate care, a bit like Jack says, means that we can do things that we never thought were possible. We can generate vaccines in record time. We can finally link up data, put patients into the right trials, and so on and so forth. So again, for me, that's another reason to be really optimistic. And also, healthcare is sort of finally ready to be enterprise scale. I didn't really understand what that meant before I switched over to a company that talks a lot about enterprise scale, but let me explain that a little bit through the Microsoft lens. So whenever we've thought about healthcare before, although huge and massive, we've never really thought about it like an organization that should be swelling together and adapting to the future challenges. Too much has been done in isolation, too much in silo, too many challenges, too many barriers at everything you want to do that's innovative. I don't know how many people in here, again, quick show of hands, how many people in here have got a company that's trying to sell to the NHS? How many people in here had more hair when they started than afterwards? So the idea that we can finally start trying to take things through at enterprise scale should be great. For me, that means being able to make sure we underpin it with great security layers. For me, that means being able to adapt to the business needs of organizations and utilizing partners in a way that's proactive and efficient, as opposed to it being blocking and stuck in procurement. Enterprise for us means that we'll be able to learn from some of the things that we've taken other organizations through and adapt them quickly. And again, for me, that's really exciting. So rather than us having to start from scratch, we can leapfrog over in somewhere that's a bit more exciting and more future-facing, take what we've learned, bring it through, and scale more rapidly. Finally, the other thing that struck me on holiday was the fact that the NHS is massive, right? It's the single largest healthcare provider in the world by some way. And I think sometimes we forget that, or at least I hadn't really anticipated the scale. I keep on reading with interest how amazing the healthcare system is in Denmark, for example. They're going to do that for 5 million or so citizens. Israel, again, great stuff going on. Nowhere near the number of patients that they've got to deal with. How many people in here have had a Kaiser Permanente report saying that they're the best thing since sliced bread? I'm sure they're great, but they've only got 12 million self-selected patients that they have to deal with. We've got 68 million, and we're trying to care for them from cradle to grave, and it is just really hard. Of course, the challenge is if you're going to be the biggest, then that does come with some responsibility. One of the challenges that I think we need to face up to is that we do need to set the tone for the rest of the world, because we do have that scale and we do have that ability to organise and showcase what works well and what we can deliver going forward. Thankfully, the human body, give or take, goes wrong wherever you are on the planet, but health systems seem to have adapted and evolved in entirely different ways. For me, it's really exciting to be able to lead through the NHS on this transformation journey, and I'm not sure if you're allowed to edit Dickens, but I did, because I'd like to leave with something slightly more optimistic, like at the end of A Tale of Two Cities. And I do wonder if the NHS and the transformation we're going on can be that source of optimism after a winter of despair. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Umang from anybody? Can't get away that quickly.
I stole the clicker.
So, actually, as you were saying, don't worry about diabetes, everyone's sort of diabetes. What would
I didn't say that, but yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, he's got that out. What sector would you think you should focus on for an epidemic use?
We were just talking about this. If you want to do something that's going to save the most lives, then solve blood pressure. In fact, if I was going to do another talk about wearing sunscreen, it would be go and get your blood pressure checked. That's sort of the head, if you like. The heart, though, of course, is in mental health. I mean, it's just devastating, and I really don't know what the answer is, and we sit there musing over it. I'm excited to be able to get some of the greatest brains now looking at it. I forgot to mention it, but one of the other things that came out that was going to be exciting about the future of medical school and students and training. We used to have this thing called a journal club. That's how we used to disseminate information, right? So you'd go in every Wednesday morning early, you get coffee and you talk about the latest research. I can't wait for us to be able to do that dynamically. So little pockets of students or caregivers can sit there looking at their data for their population and say, actually, I've just tried this thing and it's worked really well, and scale that. And I'd love those journal clubs of the future, if you like, to be focused in on things that are top of mind, which is why I think mental health will be there.
Thank you, Jack. Presentation's great. Can I just take you another stage further? Is where does collaboration fit into the landscape? The point being, in a post-COVID world, I think there's never going to be a place to bring people together to have a conversation rather than working in individual tech silos.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, part of the reason for joining Microsoft and the enterprise thing was because I think that's where they're trying to go. It was really interesting. I tried very hard not to put anything up here that had a Microsoft logo on or another company logo, because we have zillions of partners, and I didn't want to prioritize one over another. I don't know what the answer is, but it does start with some conversations. It does start with a mindset that says, let's be collaborative and think about how we do it through partnerships as opposed to going it alone. Let's start that conversation downstairs and wherever else it may be. In fact, you can all find me on LinkedIn, that'd be good, and then I can be well followed. But any forum, let us know, and we'd love to start that conversation.
One more quick question, and then we might need to move on.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm interested to know what you mean by the healthcare system being enterprise ready. I think during the pandemic there were a lot of changes made that enabled things to be rolled out quicker, but those temporary changes kind of pulled it away again, and we have to wait for some more things to come through. So what would you say, particularly in the NHS, means that you think it's enterprise ready now versus 2 or 3 years ago?
Like the integrated care systems being set up, I think that's exciting. So a challenge for us is that you go, well, I'm a hospital and I can't talk to my GP practice. If you were doing that as an enterprise, you'd find a way of fixing that as a challenge. So I'm excited about ICSs being formed. I think the conversation's moved on from it being I'm only thinking about my singular organisation into something that's a bit broader and a bit wider. I'm not sure you agree, and it may take time to come through, but I think at least you're starting those conversations. Before it's a bit like, you want to come and talk to me about collaborating with your next door neighbour, I'll see you at the next conference, I'll never see you again. Now it's like, yeah, I get it, I need to do that. So that's what I mean by that.
I think we do actually have time for another question.
Hi, I'm Nanda Adam. I'm a nutritional therapist and I focus on chronic inflammation. Mental health is one of my babies, and I have, as you say, there is a lot of data out there, and there are so many studies linking all major mental disorders and chronic inflammation. What I find with the people that I've helped is once you lower chronic inflammation, you get extraordinary results. And the reason why so many people come to you from childhood with mental health disorders is because of all the inflammatory foods that are around us and the way we live, the way we look at springs. I know we're here, it's London Tech Week, but I don't believe it's really good for us. And if you look at inflammation markers in people with any mental health disorders, they're super elevated. 50% of people who start on antidepressants 18 months later report feeling no better because chronic inflammation creates medication resistance. I think, in my humble opinion, that we should have a conversation about changing the diet of people with mental health issues.
Well, great, let's have it. I mean, to the collaboration point, to Jack's studying point, I think let's collect some data up, let's see what works, and let's see if we can take it from here to everyone else that needs it. But yeah, like I say, I think it's a really exciting time for the collaboration, the use of big data, and I look forward to seeing what everyone in here does. Thank you.